Welcome. Today I'm going to be working on a run of small cutting boards. Kind of like these, very similar. They're cherry with a maple inlay. And I've got a couple prototypes that I made here. One has a beveled side, one has a straight edge. And I'm going to use the ShopBot Desktop to do this. And the genesis of this project was I was interested in seeing how the ShopBot could do inlay. So in this project we're going to be cutting grooves in the cherry and using here's cherry blank, okay, and then using a maple blank we're going to cut away everything except for the part that fits into the cherry, and the maple will be cut as a mirror image to the grooves in the cherry, so that then I can fit the pieces together, glue them in the grooves, and then bandsaw off the maple blank and finally finish the surface and end up with a very nice inlay. Okay, we start the process by making the model on the computer to develop toolpaths for the ShopBot to use. And so I've drawn these waves just using the drawing tools that are in, I'm using Aspire here by Vectric, but VCarve Pro will also work because we're just using pocketing toolpaths. So I've drawn the waves, and these are the waves for the grooves in black. So we'll be cutting out the inside of these black areas. And then I use the mirror function to make these pink, which I think you can see, waves, and on those we'll be cutting outside of the pink, so that this part will be proud of the surface. The grooves will be 1/10 of an inch deep, and these male parts will be an extra 15 thousandths high, to make sure that when we put these together that the male part bottoms fully into the grooves. And also I had to cut away the male to make it a little shorter on the ends than the female, so that they fit together, because when we route out the female, they're going to have rounded corners, and I didn't want to get hung up on those rounded corners. So now we take these and we turn these into tool paths, and I've already done that, so I'm going to show you what they look like. We'll go ahead and preview the grooves, and I think you can see the grooves there. I think you see them better in the isometric, how they'll groove out. That'll be the cherry piece of wood. And then we'll go to the maple, and that's what those will look like. And I think you can imagine now how these will fit together perfectly. Now I've made the grooves slightly oversized by about 7 thousandths of an inch all around, and I found that works well, because it is really tough getting these together. I mean, the fit is just so perfect that I needed that little extra clearance to be able to actually fit them. Okay, so I'll turn these into two tool paths, one for the cherry, the one for the maple, and then we'll run that onto the ShopBot. First I'll cut the male pieces in the maple, because they're cut with no extra clearance. And so I've got 5 of these blanks. I'll cut all 5. And then on my first blank in the cherry, which has a 7 thousandths clearance, I can do a test fit and make sure that clearance is still right. Now I pre-drilled the hold down holes, and I've made them extra deep so that I don't hit the screws. As a matter of fact, the screw comes down, these are just 1.5 screws, 1.25 screws. They come down far enough where I can get several cuttings out of this before I get near the screw. By the way, this is the 3rd board I've cut, so I don't need to reset the Z height on the bit, because all these boards are identical. the grooves using a 1/4 inch bit in the cherry. Now comes the glue up. I've got the two pieces. They should mate, but to make them so they'll fit together with no problems, I get rid of all the little fuzzies just using some sandpaper. Just kind of relieve that edge just slightly, and that's all it takes. And then a wire brush just to clean it up so there's no little piece of stuff that gets in the way. I did the same thing to the cherry already, so it's ready to go. Now I'm going to use some waterproof glue, Type on 3. Although I'm not intending for this to go into a dishwasher, it's definitely going to have to be wiped down, and I don't want glue bonds breaking. Take a little brush, brush the glue in good. Now I'm just going to put the glue on the cherry here. I don't want to put it on the maple because I don't want the maple to swell up any, or it might not fit. It's going to be tough to fit anyway. It's a tight fit. All right, now this is where it gets to be a little bit brute force. This is a really tight fit. We call this an interference fit. So I've got to persuade the pieces to go together. If I hadn't built in that 7/1000 clearance cherry, I'd never get this together. Okay, so it's together but not real tight. But at least all the areas are mating. Okay, now I'll go ahead and put it on a couple of blocks here and start adding clamps. Actually, I've got a couple of cauls that I use to distribute the clamping force. At this point, I'm sawing off the maple, and I started the cut so you can see exactly what I'm doing. The blade is just on the maple side of the joint, so there's just a sliver of maple left, and that way I don't cut into the cherry and reduce the thickness of the plaque. So I'll just go ahead and I'm basically resawing this, and then when I'm done, I'll run this through the drum sander to get down to the finished surface. This is what the assembly looks like after it comes out of the bandsaw. You see I've just got this paper thin piece of maple on there, and now I'm going to go ahead and use my drum sander to sand that off. It'll take several passes. There you see it. Now sand it down nicely. Having run all these through the drum sander down to 150 grit, I'm now going to use the random orbital sander to finish up the sanding. And now now I'm going to cut the boards to size, and following that, then I'll cut a bevel on them because I want it to have just a slight bevel down, give it a little better look. I'm using a 40-tooth alternate tooth bevel blade. It's got about a 20-degree hook on it, and the bevel on the teeth are about 15 degrees. It does a good cross cut and a good rip. Now I'm going to put a 14-degree under bevel on all four sides just to give it a little nicer look. Before I do the final sanding, I'm going to put my brand on the back. I'm using a brass branding iron. It's got my logo on it. Heat it up with a propane torch. You get it until it starts changing colors like the colors of the rainbow, and then you keep heating some more until it sort of keeps that bright brassy look to it all the time. Then you test it out on a piece of scrap, and if you like it, you start branding. And you can do a bunch of boards with just one heating like this. Get it approximately centered. So what I do, six boards, and just give it a little touch of heat, and we'll continue. At this point, I'm getting close to the finishing stage. Even though I use a really good saw blade, there's still more marks than I want on this cross cut. So I'm going to use my low angle block plane just to take off a little bit. And always there's sanding. I'm going to use a P220 grit, and then I'm going to put a coat of shellac on to seal the wood, and come back with a finer grit. Okay, the sanding is done. Now I'm going to put a coat of 1 pound blonde shellac on that. That is 1 pound of flakes per gallon of denatured alcohol. It's very thin. This is a panel that I already put the shellac on. You can see the coloration. This is one I put the shellac on and then put one coat of the final finish that I'll talk about in a minute. This is an early prototype where I just went straight to tung oil with no shellac. You can see the difference between these two. The tung oil on the cherry with no shellac is kind of blotchy and very dark and kind of harsh. Admittedly, it's had time to darken. The cherry has time to darken, but still, it doesn't have that cherry look that I'm looking for. So the shellac helps me in that regard. Helps me get just a nice, cleaner look. Now, following the shellac, I'm using a mixture of 1/3 polyurethane varnish, 1/3 tung oil, 1/3 boiled linseed oil. And before I start getting all kinds of notes and letters saying that this is not food safe, let me tell you it is. I've done a lot of research into this, and of course shellac is very natural. It comes from a bug. But any finish today has no lead. That's number one. You know, the old food safe thing had a lot to do with the lead that was used as a dryer in older finishes. And also, if the finish doesn't chip off on a cutting board, you don't have to worry about ingesting it. And finally, any cured finish, fully cured, especially an oil finish, the molecules interlock with each other, and they don't leach out anything that can hurt you. So we're going to be just fine with this finish, and the oily finish gives it good for a cutting board because you can cut into it and you're not breaking through a film. So I'm just going to take my 1 pound cut shellac and simply apply it with a cotton pad. And the idea, like I say, is to seal the wood so that the oil doesn't look blotchy. The oil will soak in more evenly and not give you that blotchy appearance. I'm not worried about this being the finished coat, so I can touch it and so forth, because I'm going to be sanding this down later. Here we go. We'll just go around and get the rest of them, and then we'll be ready to move on. Okay, so I've got a little mixture here. It's 1/3 polyurethane varnish, 1/3 tung oil, that's pure tung oil, and 1/3 boiled linseed oil. And I had sanded the shellac down to P400, so this is nice and smooth right now. I'm just going to rub this in. The boards that I did with just the pure tung oil 3 weeks ago still aren't fully cured. It's because there's no dryer in the pure tung oil. There's nothing added to help it dry, and so you just have to wait for the air to get at it. Whereas if you use the boiled linseed oil, it's called boiled because it's got dryers in it. I don't think they actually boil it. Maybe they did way back, but anyway, the amount of dryers that's added to that, plus the dryers in the polyurethane, is enough to allow the tung oil to cure as well. And in fact, this little container I mixed up 2 days ago, I just opened it and it had a skin of cured finish on top. It's so reactive, it'll cure very quickly. So I'm just going to let that sit, in a little while I'll wipe it down. We'll do a couple of coats of that, and then we'll go on to the final step. Well, I put 2 coats of the mixture I make with 1 part tung oil, 1 part boiled linseed oil, and 1 part polyurethane varnish. Each coat I let cure for 24 hours. And now I'm going to put on a couple of coats of a tung oil, boiled linseed oil, and beeswax mixture. It's pretty thick. It's kind of like honey. You mix up the boiled linseed oil and the tung oil, and then you heat it in a water bath and sprinkle in some shredded beeswax and let it dissolve. And I can't tell you how much. You just do it until it feels kind of like thin honey, and you'll probably be okay. If you get too much, it kind of solidifies and you have to go back to the drawing board, but it's just the way it is.